Welcome back to my channel, where real story takes its time. Let's get into it.
My sister called my son a bastard at every family gathering, so I made sure she never opened her mouth like that again. The first time Delilah said it, I was helping my mother set the table for Thanksgiving dinner. My son Lucas was 8 years old, playing with his cousins in the living room, and I heard her voice cut through the warm chaos of our family gathering like a blade through silk. Well, at least my children aren't bastards. She said it quietly, just loud enough for me and our mother to hear. My hands froze on the salad tongs. Mom pretended she hadn't heard anything, suddenly very interested in adjusting the centerpiece. Delilah smiled at me. That particular smile she perfected over the years, the one that said she knew exactly what she was doing and dared me to react. I didn't, not then. My name is Andrea, and I'm going to tell you about how I destroyed my sister's perfect life. But first, you need to understand how we got here. Delilah and I grew up in a household where appearances mattered more than anything else. Our father, Richard, was a successful corporate attorney who believed that his daughters were reflections of his own accomplishments. Our mother, Patricia, came from old money and never let anyone forget it. They raised us in a beautiful colonial house in Connecticut with manicured lawns and strict expectations. Delilah was older by 3 years, and she learned early how to play the game. She got straight A's, dated, the right boys went to Yale, and married Kevin Montgomery, a man whose family owned a chain of luxury car dealerships across the Northeast. They had 2 children, Olivia and Nathan, who attended private school and took tennis lessons at the country club. I took a different path. I went to art school, which horrified my parents. I dated a musician named Tyler who had tattoos and drove a motorcycle. We never married, but we had Lucas together when I was 25. Tyler died in a car accident when Lucas was 2 years old. We weren't married when it happened, which meant that in my family's eyes, I had committed the ultimate sin. I had a child out of wedlock. Delilah never let me forget it. The comments started small. Little remarks about traditional families and proper values. She'd talk about how important it was for children to have both parents looking pointedly at Lucas. At Christmas, she'd mention how blessed Olivia and Nathan were to have a stable home environment. During Easter brunch, she discussed the importance of marriage before children, her eyes finding mine across the table. But it was at Lucas's 9th birthday party that everything changed. I'd invited the family for cake and ice cream at my small apartment. Lucas was so excited, showing everyone his new bicycle and his art supplies. Delilah arrived late, sweeping in with expensive gifts for her own children and a token present for Lucas, a coloring book clearly meant for a much younger child. We were all in the kitchen when Lucas accidentally knocked over a glass of juice. It shattered on the floor, and he immediately started crying, apologizing over and over. I was cleaning it up, reassuring him that accidents happen. Then Delilah leaned down to Olivia and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "This is why bastards need proper discipline." The room went silent. Lucas looked confused. He didn't know what the word meant, but he understood the tone. My mother busied herself with cutting the cake. My father checked his phone. Kevin suddenly needed to take a work call. Nobody said anything to Delilah. I asked everyone to leave. Right then, Delilah acted shocked, playing the victim, claiming she was just concerned about proper child rearing. My parents sided with her, saying I was being oversensitive and ruining Lucas's birthday over nothing. Lying in bed that night, listening to Lucas ask me what bastard meant, something inside me shifted. I'd spent my whole life trying to be the bigger person, absorbing Delilah's cruelty, because confronting it would make me the problem. I'd let my family's silence enable her because speaking up would disrupt their precious peace. No more. I started paying attention, really paying attention. When you look closely at someone who presents a perfect facade, you start to notice the cracks. The next morning, I called in sick to work to spend the day thinking. Lucas was at school, and the silence in my apartment gave me space to process everything. Tyler's photograph sat on the mantel, and I found myself talking to it like I sometimes did when decisions felt overwhelming. "She's not going to stop," I said to his picture, "and they're all just going to keep letting her." Tyler would have confronted Delilah immediately. He never had patience for cruelty disguised as concern. But Tyler's direct approach had often made things worse with my family. They dismissed him as crude, unsuitable, beneath their standards. His death had almost seemed convenient to them, a problem solving itself. I thought about confronting Delilah directly, having a private conversation where I demanded she stop, but I knew how that would go. She'd deny everything, twist my words, make herself the victim. My parents would mediate by telling me to be more understanding, to consider Delilah's perspective, to not make waves. The pattern had been established over decades. Something bigger was needed, something that would make ignoring her behavior impossible. I started documenting everything. Every family gathering from that point forward, I recorded on my phone. I kept a journal, noting dates, times, and exactly what Delilah said. I saved text messages where she made snide comments about single mothers or children born outside marriage. I collected evidence like a lawyer building a case which made sense, given how my father had raised us. This documentation phase lasted about 2 months. During that time, I attended every family event with new eyes, seeing patterns I'd been too close to notice before. 3 weeks after Lucas's birthday, we had Sunday dinner at my parents' house. It was a tradition they insisted on maintaining, despite how uncomfortable these gatherings had become. Delilah arrived with homemade dessert and her usual air of superiority. During dinner, she mentioned that Olivia had been chosen for the lead in her school play. "We're so proud," she said. "The director told us that children from stable homes tend to be more confident performers. Something about security, allowing them to take creative risks." She looked at Lucas when she said it. Lucas was picking at his mashed potatoes, trying to make himself smaller. "Lucas is very creative," I said evenly. "His art teacher says he has real talent." "Oh," Art, Delilah said dismissively. "That's nice for a hobby, but Olivia is developing skills that will serve her in the real world. Public speaking, confidence, leadership. Lucas has those skills too." "Does he?" She laughed lightly. "I wouldn't know. He barely speaks at these dinners. I suppose children sometimes retreat when they sense something is wrong with their family structure." My father changed the subject to his latest case. My mother busied herself serving dessert. The moment passed like all the others, absorbed into the family's collective decision to pretend everything was fine. But I had it recorded. Another piece of evidence. Delilah's marriage was one of those cracks. She and Kevin had been together for 12 years, and from the outside they looked like the ideal couple. But I started noticing things. The way Kevin would check his phone constantly during family dinners, a small smile playing at his lips. How Delilah would snap at him over minor things, her voice sharp with something that sounded like desperation. The separate bedrooms, they claimed, were because Kevin snored. During Thanksgiving, I watched Kevin excuse himself 3 times to take calls. Each time, Delilah's jaw tightened a little more. When he returned from the 3rd call, she asked sweetly, "Important business on a holiday." "Just the dealership," he said. "You know how it is." "I do know how it is," she replied, but there was an edge underneath the sugar. Later, while helping clean up, I overheard them arguing in the hallway. Kevin's voice was low and defensive. Delilah accused him of being distracted, absent, checked out of their marriage. He countered that she was controlling and impossible to please. Their voices rose until they remembered where they were, then dropped back to angry whispers. When they returned to the living room, both were smiling the perfect couple once again. But I'd seen behind the curtain, and now I couldn't unsee it. She and Kevin had been together for 12 years, and from the outside, they looked like the ideal couple. But I started noticing things. The way Kevin would check his phone constantly during family dinners, a small smile playing at his lips. How Delilah would snap at him over minor things, her voice sharp with something that sounded like desperation. The separate bedrooms, they claimed, were because Kevin snored. I reached out to an old friend from art school, Jasmine, who now worked in private investigation. Over coffee, I explained the situation, and she agreed to look into Kevin's activities. I felt guilty at first. This was my sister, after all. But then I remembered Lucas's face at his birthday party, and the guilt evaporated. Jasmine was thorough and professional. She built her business on discretion and results, serving clients who needed information but couldn't afford public scandal during the gathering process. We met weekly at a small cafe downtown, far from anywhere my family might see us. "This might take time," she warned during our second meeting. "If he's careful, tracking his movements without alerting him requires patience." "I have time," I said, "and I need to be absolutely certain before I do anything with the information." While Jasmine worked on Kevin, I continued my own investigation into Delilah's life. I started attending country club events as a guest of my parents, something I'd avoided for years. The club represented everything I'd rejected about their world, but now I needed to understand Delilah's domain. The first event was a charity lunch supporting local schools. Delilah was in her element, moving through the crowd with practiced grace, air kissing other women, and laughing at the right moments. I watched her interact with different groups, noting who she embraced and who she subtly snubbed. A woman named Priscilla Chen tried to join a conversation Delilah was having with 3 other club members. Delilah's body language shifted almost imperceptibly, a slight turning of her shoulder, a fractional step that closed the circle. Priscilla stood there awkwardly for a moment before retreating. "Who was that?" I asked my mother later. "Priscilla." She sniffed. Her husband owns those Asian fusion restaurants downtown. Very successful, but she trailed off meaningfully. They're new, and the club has standards. I thought about that conversation for days. Standards was code. Code for the kind of exclusion my family practiced with surgical precision, cutting people out while maintaining plausible deniability. I started talking to service staff at the club. Waiters, bartenders, maintenance workers, people my family barely noticed. I chatted with them during events, asking casual questions, building rapport. One bartender, Marcus, mentioned that his wife Sandra worked in the club's membership office. "Must be interesting work," I said lightly, deciding who gets in. Marcus shook his head. "Sandra hates it sometimes. Says there are members who make her job difficult, asking her to do things that don't feel right." I filed that information away carefully. 2 months into the investigation, Jasmine handed me a folder. The folder was thick, filled with surveillance photographs, bank records, and a timeline of Kevin's activities. Jasmine had been even more thorough than I'd expected. "He's not particularly clever about it," she said as I flipped through the pages. Once I knew what to look for, the pattern was obvious. Same hotel, usually Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. Separate credit card that he probably thinks your sister doesn't know about. The photos showed Kevin with Brittany Caldwell in various locations. Restaurants, hotels, walking together in parks. In one image, his hand was on the small of her back as they entered a building. In another, they were kissing in his car. "She works for him?" I asked, reading through Brittany's background information. "Sales representative at his largest dealership. Started there about 2.5 years ago. The affair seems to have begun around 6 months after she was hired, so they've been together for roughly 2 years now." I studied Brittany's photograph. She was pretty in a conventional way, young and fresh-faced. Nothing like Delilah, who was all sharp edges and careful maintenance. "There's more," Jasmine said, pulling out another section of the folder. The financial records show regular transfers to an account in Brittany's name. He's also paying rent on an apartment in her name, bought her a car, ironically, from his own dealership, and there are charges for jewelry clothing trips. "How much total?" "Close to $300,000 over the past 2 years. Maybe more. These are just what I could verify." I sat back processing the information. This was bigger than just an affair. Kevin was systematically moving marital assets to support his girlfriend. Money that belonged partly to Delilah and would have been earmarked for Olivia and Nathan's future. "The apartment lease is interesting," Jasmine continued. "It's in a building that his family's company owns, which means he's essentially paying himself rent with diverted business funds. That could be embezzlement depending on how the business is structured." "Can you find out about the business structure?" "Already did." She slid more papers across the table. "Kevin is a minority partner, but his father still controls the majority stake. Any significant financial decisions need board approval, which he definitely didn't get for these transfers. If his father found out, it could be grounds for removal from the company." I gathered all the documents carefully, my mind racing with possibilities. This was leverage, real leverage. But I needed more than just Kevin's affair. I needed something on Delilah, too. Something that would show everyone that their perfect marriage was built on rot from both sides. The next Sunday, I volunteered to help my mother organize donations for a club charity drive. It gave me an excuse to be at the club during the week, interacting with staff without arousing suspicion. I found Sandra during her lunch break, sitting alone in the employee cafeteria. She was a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and careful posture, someone who'd learned to make herself invisible. "Mind if I sit?" I asked. She looked surprised, but gestured to the empty chair. We made small talk for a few minutes before I said, "Your husband Marcus mentioned you work in membership. That must be interesting." Her expression shifted, something guarded, sliding into place. "It's a job. My sister Delilah Montgomery is very involved with membership decisions." I think Sandra's hands tightened around her coffee cup. Mrs. Montgomery has strong opinions about membership standards. The careful phrasing told me everything. I leaned forward slightly, lowering my voice. Marcus mentioned you sometimes feel uncomfortable about things you're asked to do. If there's something wrong happening, I want to help. She studied my face for a long moment. Why would you help? She's your sister. Because what's right matters more than family loyalty. And because I think you're being put in an impossible position. Sandra glanced around the cafeteria, checking who might overhear. Then she made a decision. I keep copies, she said quietly, of everything. Just in case I need to protect myself someday. Copies of what? Applications that were rejected for reasons that had nothing to do with qualifications. Emails from Mrs. Montgomery with instructions about which families to discourage. Notes from membership committee meetings where she said things that shouldn't be said. My heart rate quickened. Would you be willing to share those copies if it would stop what she's doing? Yes, but I need protection. This job supports my family. I understand. Let me think about how to handle this properly. I wrote down my number. Call me when you're ready. And Sandra, thank you for having the courage to document this. Over the next few weeks, I met with Sandra 3 more times. She provided me with a meticulously organized file of Delilah's discriminatory practices, emails where Delilah referred to certain applicants as not our kind of people, notes from meetings where she'd argued against families based on their ethnicity or economic background, records of qualified applications that were mysteriously rejected after Delilah's involvement. It was damning evidence of systematic discrimination, and it had been happening for years. I also learned something else during this process. Several rejected families had noticed the pattern and were considering legal action, but they lacked proof. Sandra's documentation could support a legitimate lawsuit against the club and anyone personally involved in the discrimination. But I didn't use it. Not yet. Kevin was having an affair with a woman named Brittany Caldwell. She was 26, worked as a sales representative at one of his dealerships, and they'd been seeing each other for almost 2 years. There were hotel receipts, photographs of them having dinner together, text message records that Jasmine had obtained through methods I didn't ask about. The evidence was thorough and damning, but I didn't use it. Not yet. I kept watching, kept gathering information. I learned that Kevin had been siphoning money from the business to support his relationship with Brittany. He bought her a car, paid for a luxury apartment in her name, and took her on trips he claimed were business conferences. The amount he diverted totaled nearly $300,000 over the past 2 years. During this time, Lucas started therapy. Not because of any crisis, but because I wanted him to have tools to process the subtle cruelty he'd been experiencing. Dr. Angela Morrison was wonderful, with him helping him understand that the problem wasn't with him, but with how others chose to treat him. After one of Lucas's sessions, Dr. Morrison asked to speak with me privately. Lucas is doing well, she said, but he's internalizing more than you might realize. He's developed coping mechanisms that concern me, making himself small, apologizing excessively, assuming blame for others' reactions. Because of my family. He didn't say that directly, but yes, I believe so. Children are remarkably perceptive about power dynamics. Lucas has learned that speaking up about his hurt causes problems for you, so he's decided it's better to stay quiet. The revelation hit me hard. I thought I was protecting him by maintaining family relationships by trying to model forgiveness and patience. Instead, I was teaching him that his pain mattered less than other people's comfort. What should I do? I asked. That depends on what you want him to learn. Right now, he's learning that tolerating mistreatment is necessary for family acceptance. Is that the lesson you want him to carry into adulthood? I drove home thinking about all the ways I'd been complicit in his suffering. Every time I'd smoothed over one of Delilah's comments, every family dinner I'd forced him to attend, every time I'd asked him to be patient with grandparents who allowed his abuse. I'd been teaching him that his dignity was negotiable. That night, I started planning in earnest. Not just gathering information, but strategizing the perfect moment to deploy it. I needed something that would make my family confront their dysfunction in a way they couldn't rationalize or dismiss. The opportunity came when my mother mentioned the 40th anniversary party during one of our phone calls. This was 4 months after Lucas's birthday party, and I'd been methodically gathering evidence the entire time. We're planning something special at the club, she said excitedly. A celebration of family and commitment. Your father and I want all of you there. You, Delilah, the grandchildren. It's important to us. Of course we'll be there, I said, and I meant it. Because this party, this celebration of their perfect family image, would be the ideal stage for truth. I spent the next 3 months preparing meticulously. I worked with a tech consultant to ensure I could connect my phone to the venue's projection system. I organized my evidence into a coherent presentation. Photos, documents, records, all arranged to tell a clear story. I practiced timing, knowing I'd need to move quickly before anyone could stop me. I also prepared Lucas, not for what would happen, but for the possibility that things with our family might change. What if we didn't have to go to Sunday dinners anymore? I asked him one evening while we made tacos together. He looked up from shredding cheese, hope and uncertainty mixed on his face. Really? Really. What if we only saw the family members who treat you kindly? Would that be okay with you? Would Grandma and Grandpa be mad? They might be, but you matter more to me than their feelings. You've always mattered more. He hugged me then, he's forgotten, and whispered I don't like Sunday dinners. Everyone looks at me funny, and Aunt Lia makes me feel bad. I know, sweetheart. I am so sorry I made you keep going. It's okay, Mom. You were trying. But it wasn't okay, and I was done just trying. It was time to act. I also discovered something about Delilah that surprised me. She'd been involved in a scheme at her country club, falsifying records, to ensure that certain families couldn't join specifically families she deemed unsuitable based on race and economic status. She'd been careful about it, but I had connections too. One of the club employees, Sandra, had kept detailed records of Delilah's instructions, horrified by what she was being asked to do, but afraid to speak up because she needed the job. The week before the anniversary party, I had one final meeting with Sandra. She was nervous, knowing that providing this evidence could have repercussions for her. Are you sure about this? She asked, sliding a flash drive across the table. Once this comes out, there's no taking it back. I'm sure. And Sandra, I promise you'll be protected. I've already spoken with a lawyer about whistleblower protections. What Delilah asked you to do was illegal. You're not the wrongdoer here. Some of those families she rejected. Sandra said, her voice shaking. They have kids who wanted to swim here in the summer, take tennis lessons. I had to tell them no, because Mrs. Montgomery said they wouldn't fit in. Her voice broke slightly. One mother asked me directly if it was because they were black, and I had to lie to her face. You were in an impossible situation, I said, but now you're doing the right thing. She nodded, wiping her eyes. I hope your son appreciates what you're doing for him someday. He already does. That's why I have to see this through. Armed with this information, I waited. I needed the perfect moment, the right stage for my revelation. I needed Delilah to feel what Lucas had felt, humiliated in front of the people who mattered most. The days leading up to the party felt surreal. I went through normal motions, work, Lucas's school activities, grocery shopping, while carrying the weight of what I was about to do. Jasmine called twice to make sure I was certain about my plans. There's no going back from this, she reminded me. Once you expose them publicly, your family relationships will fundamentally change. They're already fundamentally broken, I said. I'm just making everyone acknowledge it. Kevin called me 3 days before the party, which was unusual enough to make me wary. Andrea, hey, it's Kevin. I wanted to talk to you about something. What is it? It's about Delilah. He paused, and I could hear tension in his voice. She's been stressed lately, and I think she might say something at the party about Lucas and your situation. I just wanted to warn you. The audacity was almost impressive. Kevin was cheating on my sister with his employee and embezzling from his family business, and he was warning me about Delilah's potential behavior. Thanks for the heads up, I said neutrally. I know things have been tense between you two. For what it's worth, I think she crosses a line sometimes, but you know how she is. She thinks she's helping. Being honest, right? Helping. After we hung up, I wondered if Kevin sensed something coming. If some instinct warned him that his carefully constructed double life was about to collapse. But it didn't matter. He'd made his choices just like Delilah had made hers. The night before the party, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the ways this could go wrong. What if the technology failed? What if my family turned on me instead of confronting their own behavior? What if Lucas got caught in the crossfire, ended up hurt worse than before? But then I remembered Dr. Morrison's words about what I was teaching Lucas by tolerating his mistreatment. I thought about all the future family gatherings where he'd have to shrink himself to fit into their narrow definition of acceptable. I imagined him as a teenager, then an adult, still carrying the shame they'd loaded onto him. No, whatever happens tomorrow, it would be better than continuing this pattern. The opportunity came at my parents' 40th wedding anniversary party. They planned an elaborate celebration at the country club, the same one where Delilah wielded her influence. 200 guests, a live band, an open bar, and a seated dinner. My parents had spared no expense wanting to showcase their successful marriage and, by extension, their successful family. I wore a navy dress that Tyler had always loved, and I made sure Lucas looked sharp in his new suit. Delilah, of course, arrived in designer everything. Kevin played the devoted husband. Olivia and Nathan were perfect little reflections of their parents. During cocktail hour, Delilah cornered me by the bar. "I'm surprised you came," she said, sipping champagne. "These events can't be easy for you being alone." "I'm not alone," I said. "I have Lucas." "Yes, but it's not the same as having a real family, is it?" She glanced over at Lucas, who was talking with our cousin. Poor thing, growing up without a father, with a mother who never married. People talk, you know. Do they? Of course. Everyone wonders what kind of example you're setting, what kind of values you're teaching him. She leaned closer. "I worry about him, Andrea. Children from broken homes often struggle, and a bastard child especially." "That's an interesting word choice," I said, interrupting her. "You seem to use it a lot." She laughed. "Well, if the shoe fits." "Tell me something, Delilah," I said. "Does Kevin know about your discriminatory practices at the club? The families you've blacklisted based on their background?" Her smile faltered slightly. "I don't know what you're talking about." "And do you know about Brittany Caldwell?" The color drained from her face. "I thought we might have a conversation before dinner," I continued. "Just the two of us. Maybe include Kevin. We have so much to discuss." I walked away, leaving her frozen by the bar. I could feel her eyes on my back, could imagine the panic setting in as she tried to figure out what I knew and how I knew it. Dinner was called, and everyone moved to the dining room. The space was beautiful, decorated in silver and gold with floral arrangements on every table. My parents sat at the head table with Delilah, Kevin, and a few other family members. I was seated nearby with Lucas. The speeches began after the main course. My father spoke about building a life with my mother, about the importance of family and legacy. My mother thanked everyone for coming and talked about how blessed she was. Then Delilah stood up. She was good at this, giving speeches, commanding attention. She talked about growing up with wonderful parents who taught her the value of commitment and tradition. She mentioned her own marriage, looking lovingly at Kevin, who smiled back with practiced ease. She talked about her children and the importance of providing them with stability and proper values. And then she looked at me. "Of course, not everyone chooses the traditional path," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Some people make mistakes, but family means supporting each other. Even when our loved ones fall short of expectations. Even when they have children in less than ideal circumstances." The room was quiet. People shifted uncomfortably. Lucas looked down at his plate, and my heart broke for him all over again. I stood up. "You're right, Delilah," I said. "Families should support each other. They should also be honest with each other." I pulled out my phone and connected it to the venue's projection system. The technical staff had been very helpful when I explained I wanted to show a surprise slideshow for my parents. The screen behind the head table flickered to life. "Kevin," I said, "could you explain to everyone who Brittany Caldwell is?" The first image appeared. Kevin and Brittany at a restaurant, his hand on hers across the table. Delilah gasped. Kevin's face went white. "That's from about 6 months ago," I narrated as more photos appeared. "Here's one from their weekend in the Hamptons last July. Kevin told everyone he was at a dealership conference, didn't he?" The room erupted in whispers. My mother stood up, horrified. My father looked between the screen and Kevin with mounting fury. "Andrea, stop this immediately," Delilah hissed, but her voice shook. "Oh, but we're just getting started," I said. More images appeared. Hotel receipts, bank transfers, text messages. Kevin has spent nearly $300,000 on his girlfriend over the past 2 years. Money he took from the family business. Kevin tried to speak, but nothing came out. Delilah's perfect facade crumbled before everyone's eyes, her face twisted with shock and humiliation. "But Delilah," I continued, "you're not innocent either." The screen changed to show documents from the country club emails and records Sandra had provided. "These are records showing how my sister has systematically prevented families from joining this club based on race and economic status." She's violated discrimination laws and the club's own bylaws. Delilah was crying now, mascara running down her face. You vindictive witch, she spat at me. You've ruined everything. No, I said calmly. You did that yourself. I just made sure everyone knew about it. I looked around the room at all the faces staring at me. Family, friends, colleagues of my parents. My sister has called my son a bastard at every family gathering for years, I said. She's made his childhood a source of shame. She's punished him for the circumstances of his birth, something he had no control over. And all of you let her. I turned to my parents. You've prioritized appearances over everything else. You've allowed Delilah to abuse Lucas because addressing it would be uncomfortable because it would disrupt the perfect family image you've crafted. My mother was crying. My father looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Lucas is the best thing that ever happened to me, I said, my voice breaking slightly. He's kind, creative, and loving. He deserves better than this family has given him, and I'm done pretending otherwise. I took Lucas's hand and we walked out of the country club. Behind us, the party descended into chaos. I could hear raised voices, accusations flying, the sounds of Delilah's perfect life imploding. The aftermath was spectacular. Kevin's affair became public knowledge, which led to investigations into his business practices. He was removed from the family business and faced criminal charges for embezzlement. The divorce was ugly and expensive. The country club launched an investigation into Delilah's conduct. Several families came forward with complaints about being excluded or treated poorly. She was permanently banned from membership, a social death sentence in her circles. The club faced lawsuits in which Delilah was named personally. My parents were mortified. Their anniversary party became infamous for all the wrong reasons. My father's firm lost clients who didn't want to be associated with the scandal. My mother was quietly asked to step down from several charity boards. But the real consequences hit where it mattered most. Olivia and Nathan, Delilah's perfect children, had to leave their private school. The scandal followed them, and my sister couldn't afford the tuition without Kevin's income. They ended up in public school experiencing the same challenges Lucas had faced. Delilah lost her house in the divorce and had to move into a small apartment. Her social circle evaporated. The friends who'd once praised her perfect family disappeared when that perfection proved to be a lie. My parents tried to repair things with me, but I kept them at arm's length. They could see Lucas occasionally supervised, but only if they treated him with the respect he deserved. It took months before I allowed unsupervised visits, and I made it clear that any hint of judgment or cruel comments would result in immediate removal from our lives. 6 months after the anniversary disaster, Delilah called me. Her voice was small, nothing like the confident tone she'd always used. "Can we talk?" she asked. We met at a coffee shop far from our old neighborhood. She looked different, tired, older, humbled. Her designer clothes had been replaced with basics. Her hair needed touching up. Her manicure was gone. "I'm sorry," she said without preamble. "For everything. For what I said about Lucas. For how I treated you." I sipped my coffee waiting. I was jealous, she admitted. "Your life looked messy from the outside, but you were happy. You loved Tyler, and then you loved Lucas, and you didn't care what anyone thought. Meanwhile, I was trapped in a loveless marriage, following rules I didn't even agree with, trying to be perfect for parents who would never be satisfied." "That doesn't excuse what you did to Lucas." "I know. Nothing excuses it." Tears filled her eyes. "He was an innocent child, and I took out my bitterness on him. I'm ashamed of myself." I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation, but all I saw was genuine remorse. "Olivia asked me the other day why I was so mean to Lucas," Delilah continued. "She said the kids at school call her names now, and she finally understands how it feels. She asked if that's how Lucas felt when I called him that word." "And what did you tell her?" "The truth. That I was wrong. That I hurt an innocent boy because I was unhappy with my own life. That I'm trying to be better." She wiped her eyes. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I understand now." I didn't forgive her that day. Forgiveness would take time if it came at all. But I listened, and when she asked if she could apologize to Lucas directly, I agreed to consider it. That conversation with Lucas happened 3 months later in a therapist's office. Dr. Angela Morrison helped facilitate it, making sure Lucas felt safe and understood that nothing was his fault. Delilah apologized without excuses, explaining that her behavior reflected her own problems, not anything wrong with him or his family. Lucas accepted her apology with grace. That surprised me. He was 10 by then, old enough to understand complexity, young enough to still believe in redemption. Today, nearly 2 years after the anniversary party, my relationship with my sister is complicated but improving. She sees a therapist regularly and has acknowledged the harm she caused. She's working a regular job now without the country club connections or the luxury lifestyle, and she seems more genuine than she ever was before. Olivia and Nathan spend time with Lucas occasionally. They're good kids who were as much victims of their mother's toxicity as anyone. They've adapted to their new circumstances, and I think they're better for it. My parents have slowly rebuilt bridges with me. They're more present grandparents to Lucas now, though they still struggle with letting go of their obsession with appearances. Old habits die hard, but at least they're trying. Kevin remarried Brittany, which was an interesting choice. Last I heard, his new car dealership venture wasn't doing well. Karma has its own timing. As for me and Lucas, we're thriving. I started my own graphic design business, which has grown steadily. Lucas is nearly 12 now, confident and creative, no longer carrying the weight of other people's judgments. He knows his worth, and more importantly, he knows he's loved completely and unconditionally. People sometimes ask if I regret what I did at the anniversary party. They frame it as going too far, being vindictive, destroying my family over words. But here's what they don't understand. I didn't destroy my family. My family was already broken. I just refused to keep pretending it wasn't. Delilah spent years weaponizing shame against my son. She used his very existence as a source of ridicule and moral superiority. She made him feel less than somehow wrong for being born, and my family enabled it because addressing the cruelty would have been uncomfortable. I made a choice to protect my child. I chose his well-being over my family's comfort. I chose truth over the pretty lies they'd wrapped themselves in. If that makes me vindictive, I can live with that. Because at the end of the day, Lucas doesn't flinch anymore when we go to family gatherings. He doesn't brace himself for insults disguised as concern. He walks into rooms with his head high, knowing he belongs just as much as anyone else. And Delilah never ever opens her mouth to call him that word again. Some people might say I went too far. That public humiliation was cruel, that I should have handled it privately, given my sister a chance to change on her own. But those people didn't watch their 9-year-old son learn what bastard meant. They didn't see him internalize shame for circumstances beyond his control. They didn't spend years listening to veiled insults and watching their family choose comfort over their child's dignity. I gave my sister years to change. Every time she made a comment, I had the opportunity to expose her then, but I stayed quiet, hoping she'd develop empathy on her own. She didn't. She escalated. So yes, I made sure everyone saw exactly who she was. I made sure there were consequences for years of cruelty, and I made sure that my son would never again have to endure her abuse in silence while our family looked away. Lucas asked me recently if I was happy. We were making dinner together, and the question came out of nowhere, the way his deepest thoughts often do. Yes, I told him honestly, I am. Even though Grandma and Grandpa were upset and Aunt Delilah lost her house, especially because of that, I said, sometimes people need to lose things before they can become better, and you needed me to protect you. That was more important than keeping peace. He thought about that while stirring the pasta sauce. Then he hugged me sudden and fierce. I love you, Mom. I love you too, sweetheart. That moment made everything worth it. The family drama, the scandal, the ongoing complications of rebuilt relationships. All of it was worth seeing my son comfortable in his own skin, secure in the knowledge that someone would always fight for him. My sister learned a painful lesson about the consequences of cruelty. My parents learned that appearances aren't worth sacrificing your grandchildren. Kevin learned that betrayal catches up with you eventually. And I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to be complicit in someone's abuse of your child, no matter who that someone is. Lucas will never be called a bastard at a family gathering again. Not because my family suddenly developed better manners, but because they know now that I will burn down their perfect facade every single time they try to hurt my son. And I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Your sister gets the pool house, Mom declared during dinner. The whole family began picking their favorite rooms. I smiled as the property deed showed my name only. Their room assignments would need serious legal counsel. The conversation started innocently enough over roasted chicken and mashed potatoes. My mother set down her wine glass with deliberate precision, the kind of movement that signaled an announcement was coming. We've been thinking about the future, she said. glancing at my father about the estate in Lake Geneva. My sister Charlotte perked up immediately. Her fork paused halfway to her mouth, and I watched her eyes light up with interest. Charlotte had always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. She married Eric Thompson, a successful investment banker, and they had two picture-perfect children who attended private schools and took violin lessons. I was the other daughter, the one who chose social work instead of law school, the one who rented an apartment instead of buying a house in the suburbs, the one who showed up to family dinners alone while Charlotte brought her magazine-worthy family. The Lake Geneva property, Charlotte asked, setting down her fork entirely. My mother nodded, launching into what I would later realize was a carefully rehearsed speech. Your father and I won't be around forever. We want to make sure the estate stays in the family. We've decided to keep it as a shared family home where everyone can gather. My stomach tightened, but I kept my expression neutral. Years of being overlooked had taught me to hide my reactions. Well, Charlotte, we thought you and Eric and the kids could have the pool house, my mother continued. It has 3 bedrooms, and it's been recently renovated. Perfect for your family. Charlotte's face transformed into pure delight. Mom, that's wonderful. The kids will love having their own space by the pool. My father jumped in, clearly excited about this plan they'd concocted. Eric, there's that office space above the garage. You could set up a home office there for when you need to work remotely. Eric nodded enthusiastically. That sounds perfect, Marcus. Thank you both. Then Charlotte turned to her children, 9-year-old Sophie and 6-year-old Dylan, who had been quietly eating their dinner. Kids, how would you like to have your own bedrooms at Grandma and Grandpa's lake house? The children cheered, and my mother beamed at them with the kind of warmth I'd spent my childhood craving, but rarely receiving. Now we'll keep the main house for when we visit, my mother said, but there's plenty of room for everyone. I took a sip of water, waiting for someone to acknowledge my existence in this conversation. Nobody did. Charlotte was already planning. Sophie could have the bedroom with the window seat, and Dylan could take the one overlooking the garden. Eric and I would obviously need the master bedroom in the pool house. What about Aunt Rosa? Sophie asked surprisingly. At least someone remembered I was sitting at the table. My mother waved her hand dismissively. Oh, your aunt can use one of the guest rooms in the main house when she visits. She doesn't need as much space since it's just her. The words stung, but I'd learned to absorb these little cuts without showing pain. Just her. As if my life was somehow less valuable because I didn't have a husband and children. Charlotte continued planning, as if organizing a military operation. We should probably get new furniture for the pool house. Something durable that can handle the kids. Maybe a sectional sofa for the living area. Excellent idea, my mother agreed. We can go shopping together next week. My father suggested ideas for the outdoor space, while Eric discussed potential renovations to the garage office. The conversation swirled around me like I was invisible, a ghost, at my own family's table. Finally, I spoke. This is quite a detailed plan. Everyone turned to look at me as if they'd forgotten I could talk. Well, we've been thinking about it for months, my mother said, a hint of defensiveness in her tone. We wanted to have everything figured out before we brought it up. I see, I repeated quietly. You understand, don't you, honey? My father asked, using the patronizing tone he reserved for explaining things he thought were over my head. It makes sense for Charlotte's family to have the pool house. They have children who will actually use it. Charlotte reached across the table to pat my hand, her diamond bracelet catching the light. You're welcome to visit any time, of course. We'll make sure there's always a room available for you in the main house. A room available in what they all believed was becoming Charlotte's domain. I smiled the kind of smile I'd perfected over years of swallowing disappointment. That's very generous of you. The dinner conversation moved on to other topics, but I excused myself early, claiming a headache. As I drove back to my small apartment, I thought about the Lake Geneva estate. My grandmother had built that house in 1962. She'd been a remarkable woman who started her own textile business when women entrepreneurs were rare. She poured her heart and considerable fortune into that property. I'd spent countless summers there as a child, helping her in the garden and listening to her stories on the wraparound porch. Charlotte usually stayed for a week or two, but I'd spend the entire summer with Grandma. She taught me about resilience, about standing up for myself, about the difference between kindness and being a doormat. Don't let people walk over you just because you're quiet, she used to tell me. Quiet doesn't mean weak. Grandma had passed away 3 years ago, and I'd mourned her deeply. She was the only person in my family who truly saw me, who valued me for who I was rather than who I wasn't. The following week, Charlotte invited me to lunch. We met at an upscale bistro downtown, the kind of place where salads cost $20 and came with edible flowers. "I'm so excited about the lake house," Charlotte gushed after we ordered. "Eric and I have been looking at furniture catalogs. I found this gorgeous outdoor dining set that would be perfect for the patio area by the pool." I sipped my iced tea and listened. "We're thinking about hosting a family Christmas there this year," she continued. "Wouldn't that be magical? The kids could go ice skating on the lake, and we could decorate the pool house like a winter wonderland." "Sounds lovely," I said. Charlotte leaned forward, her expression shifting to something that resembled concern. "I know this might be an adjustment for you. I mean, you spent so much time there with Grandma when we were kids." "I did," I acknowledged. "But you understand why this arrangement makes sense, right?" She stirred her salad absently. "You don't have a family of your own yet, so you don't need that much space. When you do get married and have kids, we can always work something out." When not if, as if my worth was contingent on achieving certain life milestones that mirrored hers. "Charlotte," I said carefully, "has anyone actually shown you legal documentation about the estate transfer?" She blinked, surprised by the question. "What do you mean? I mean, has Mom or Dad shown you paperwork? Deeds, transfer documents, anything official?" Charlotte laughed, a tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. "Rosa, it's our parents. I trust them to handle the legal details. Why would I need to see paperwork?" I nodded slowly, just curious about how it's all being structured. "You worry too much about details," she said, waving her fork. "Everything will work out fine. It always does." "I thought it always works out fine for you." 2 weeks after that lunch, I received a call from Robert Fletcher, my grandmother's attorney. We'd stayed in touch occasionally after her death, mostly regarding her charitable foundation that I helped manage. "Rosa, I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time," he said. "I wanted to discuss something important with you." "Of course, Mr. Fletcher. What's going on?" There was a pause. "I received an inquiry from your mother's attorney about the Lake Geneva property. They're requesting documentation regarding the estate transfer." My heart rate picked up. "What kind of documentation?" "Specifically, they want to verify the chain of ownership and explore options for subdividing the property or creating a family trust." He cleared his throat. "Rosa, I need to ask you directly. Have you told your family about your grandmother's will?" The question hung in the air between us. "No," I admitted. "I haven't." "May I ask why not?" I thought about how to explain it. I guess I wanted to see what would happen, how they'd treat me if they thought I had nothing. Mr. Fletcher was quiet for a moment. "And how have they been treating you?" "About how I expected," I said quietly. "Rosa, I understand this is a difficult situation, but you're going to need to tell them eventually. Your mother's attorney is asking questions I can't answer without your permission, and frankly, the longer you wait, the more complicated this becomes." "I know," I said. "I've been thinking about the right time." "There may not be a perfect time," he said gently, "but you might want to do it sooner rather than later, before your family makes plans based on false assumptions." After we hung up, I sat in my living room staring at the wall. Mr. Fletcher was right, of course, but there was something satisfying about watching my family's elaborate plans unfold, knowing the foundation they were building on was pure fiction. The satisfaction was complicated, though mixed with genuine sadness. Part of me had hoped that maybe, just maybe, they would include me in their planning, that someone would turn to me during one of these elaborate discussions and ask what I thought, what I wanted, whether I had any memories of a place that mattered. But they never did. Each family gathering became another performance where I played the role of the agreeable sister, the invisible daughter, while they choreographed a future that erased me from the property I actually owned. My grandmother's will had been very specific. The Lake Geneva estate, including the main house, pool house, all acreage, and all structures on the property, had been left entirely to me. Not to my parents, not to be divided between Charlotte and me, just to me. She'd explained it in a letter she'd left with Mr. Fletcher, a letter I'd read so many times I had it memorized. "Dearest Rosa," it began, "if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I hope you're remembering all our summers together with fondness. I'm leaving you the Lake Geneva house because I know you'll cherish it the way I did. You're the one who spent time there, who helped me plant the roses and repair the dock. You're the one who listened to my stories and understood why that place was special. Your sister visited occasionally, but you live there with me. You earned this through love and time, not obligation. Your parents may not understand my decision, and I'm sorry for any burden this places on you, but I trust you to do what's right with the property. Keep it, sell it, share it. The choice is yours. Just know that I'm giving it to you because you deserve it, not because your sister doesn't. You've always been overlooked, my dear girl, and I wanted to make sure you knew that I saw you. I always saw you. With all my love, Grandma. I cried when I first read it, overwhelmed by her recognition and love. But I'd also felt a weight settle on my shoulders. My grandmother had given me something valuable, yes, but she'd also given me a problem. For 3 years, I kept quiet. My parents assumed the estate was part of their inheritance. They'd never actually checked. They'd simply assumed, and I'd let them. Now they were making plans based on those assumptions, and I had a decision to make. The next family dinner was even more elaborate. Charlotte brought architectural magazines showing pool house renovations. Eric had sketches of his proposed garage office. Sophie and Dylan had drawn pictures of their future bedrooms. My parents had clearly been busy too. My father produced a binder, an actual 3-ring binder labeled Lake Geneva Family Estate Plan. Inside were printed spreadsheets showing a proposed schedule for property maintenance, utility cost sharing, and seasonal usage calendars. I've broken down the expenses proportionally, my father explained, flipping through pages of calculations. Given that Charlotte's family will be the primary users of the pool house, they'll cover 40% of the annual costs. Your mother and I will handle 45% for the main house upkeep. Rosa, we've allocated 15% for your occasional visits and guest room usage. I stared at the spreadsheet showing my 15% allocation. They had assigned monetary value to my future presence in the house, calculated down to the dollar. We measured everything last weekend, Charlotte announced, spreading papers across the dining table. The pool house is actually bigger than we thought. We could potentially add a small sunroom off the master bedroom. My mother examined the sketches enthusiastically. That would be beautiful, especially facing the lake. My father suggested contractors they could hire. Eric discussed budgets and timelines. Charlotte showed paint swatches and fabric samples. I watched this production with growing amazement. They'd gone from planning to actually measuring and designing renovations for a property none of them owned. What do you think, Rosa? Charlotte asked, holding up 2 paint samples. Seafoam or sage green for the pool house living room. I think you might want to hold off on painting plans, I said carefully. Why? My mother asked. The current color is so outdated, it needs refreshing. Have you spoken to a lawyer about the property transfer? I asked. My father frowned. Our attorney is handling everything. Why do you keep asking about legal matters? Because I'm curious about the actual ownership documentation, I said, keeping my voice steady. Rosa, you're being paranoid, Charlotte said, laughing. This is our family. We don't need lawyers and paperwork to trust each other. But you already involved lawyers, I pressed. You just haven't asked them the right questions. I'm just saying before you start planning major renovations, you might want to verify who actually owns the property. My mother's expression hardened. Your father and I are handling the estate. You don't need to worry about details. Actually, I said, my voice calm despite my racing heart. I think everyone should worry about details when making plans this extensive. Dad's binder has construction budgets in it. Charlotte's talking about structural additions. These aren't small decisions. Eric cleared his throat. Rosa has a point. We should probably have the title insurance sorted before we commit to contractors. The title is fine, my father snapped. Everything is in order. Have you seen the actual deed? I asked, or the probate documents from Grandma's estate? My mother set down her fork with deliberate precision. Why are you being so obstinate about this? Do you not want your sister to be happy? The question was designed to make me the villain, to position me as the jealous, petty sister who couldn't stand seeing Charlotte's joy. It was a familiar tactic, one that had worked on me for years. But not anymore. I want everyone to have accurate information before making irreversible decisions, I said steadily. That's not obstinance, that's common sense. But do you actually own the Lake Geneva house? I asked directly. The table went quiet. My father's face reddened. Of course we do, he said. It was my mother's house, and when she passed, it became part of our estate. Did she have a will? I asked. Naturally, my mother said stiffly. Everything was left to us as it should be. Did you actually read the will? I asked. Charlotte looked uncomfortable now. Rosa, Why are you being so difficult about this? We're trying to plan something nice for the whole family. I'm not being difficult, I said. I'm asking legitimate questions that apparently no one else has thought to ask. My father stood up his chair, scraping loudly against the floor. That's enough, Rosa. Your grandmother left everything to us, and we're choosing to share it with the family. You should be grateful instead of interrogating us. I spoke with Robert Fletcher last week, I said quietly. The name hit like a bomb. Robert Fletcher had been my grandmother's attorney for 40 years. Everyone at the table knew who he was. Why would you contact him? My mother demanded. He contacted me, I said truthfully. Your attorney has been asking him questions about the property. As they should be, my father said, to facilitate the transfer. What transfer? I asked. From the estate to us, obviously, Charlotte said, though her voice had lost some of its confidence. I opened my purse and pulled out a folder I had brought with me. Inside was a copy of my grandmother's will, specifically the section regarding the Lake Geneva property. Before you go any further with your planning, I said, sliding the folder across the table to my father, you might want to read page 12. My father grabbed this folder and opened it. His face went from red to pale in seconds. My mother leaned over his shoulder, and I watched the color drain from her face, too. This can't be right, my mother whispered. What is it? Charlotte asked, looking between our parents with confusion. My father read aloud, his voice shaking. I hereby bequeath my property located at 847 Lakeshore Drive, Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, including the main residence pool house, all outbuildings, and the entirety of the 5-acre parcel to my granddaughter, Rosa Catherine Preston, in its entirety. The silence that followed was deafening. There must be some mistake, Charlotte said, her voice small. There's no mistake, I said quietly. Grandma left the house to me 3 years ago. I've been the legal owner since her estate was settled. My mother's hands were shaking. Why didn't you tell us? I wanted to see what you would do, I said. Honestly, I wanted to see how you'd treat me if you thought I didn't have anything you wanted. This is ridiculous, my father said, finding his anger again. My mother obviously wasn't thinking clearly when she made this decision. She was completely competent, I said. Mr. Fletcher made sure of that. There were multiple witnesses, psychological evaluations, everything required to ensure the will was ironclad. Charlotte looked like she'd been slapped. But we've been planning everything. The pool house, the renovations, Christmas. Those were your plans, I said, not mine. You let us believe we'd be living there, Eric said, speaking for the first time. His face was hard with anger. I never said you'd be living there, I corrected. You all assumed. I just didn't correct you. That's manipulative, Charlotte spat. You deliberately deceived us. Did I asked? Or did you all just make assumptions based on what you wanted to be true? My mother stood up, her napkin falling to the floor. How could you do this? How could you let us make fools of ourselves? The same way you've made me feel foolish my entire life, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. Every time you prioritized Charlotte, every time you dismissed my choices, every time you treated me like I was less important because I didn't follow the path you wanted. That's not fair, my father said. Isn't it? I looked at each of them. Tonight at this dinner, before you knew about the will, how did you treat me? You were assigning rooms in what you thought was your house, and you gave me guest room privileges. Charlotte was picking out furniture and planning renovations. No one asked what I thought or what I wanted. I was just supposed to be grateful for whatever scraps you decided to throw my way. We're your family, my mother said, tears in her eyes now. Exactly, I said. You're my family, and you are willing to give me the least, assume the worst, and expect me to smile and accept it. Sophie, who had been quiet through all of this, suddenly spoke up. Are we not getting our bedrooms at the lake house? The innocence of her question broke something in the room. Charlotte wrapped an arm around her daughter. We need to contest this will, my father said. There are legal options. There aren't, I said. Mr. Fletcher made sure of that. The will is airtight. Grandma knew exactly what she was doing. She turned you against us? My mother said bitterly. No, I said firmly. She loved me. She saw me. That's something you never did. I stood up, leaving my dinner half-eaten. I'm going to leave now. When you're ready to have an actual conversation about this one where you listen instead of demand, you know where to find me. If you walk out that door, my father said, his voice full of threat, don't expect us to welcome you back. I paused at the doorway and looked back at him. Dad, you haven't welcomed me in years. You've tolerated me. There's a difference. I walked out. The drive home was surreal. My hands shook on the steering wheel, adrenaline flooding my system. I'd actually done it. I'd stood up to them. I stopped at a red light and caught sight of my reflection in the rearview mirror. My face was flushed, my eyes bright with unshed tears. But there was something else there too, a spark of something I hadn't seen in years. Pride, maybe, or just relief at finally telling the truth. My phone started ringing before I made it back to my apartment. Charlotte's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. She called 3 more times. Then my mother called, then my father. I turned off my phone. The next few days were quiet. I kept my phone off for the first 24 hours, needing space to process everything. When I finally turned it back on, there were 17 missed calls and a dozen text messages. I went to work, came home, and tried to process what had happened. My colleague, Jennifer, noticed my distraction. "You okay?" she asked over coffee in the break room. I gave her the abbreviated version. Jennifer's eyes got wider with each sentence. "Wait," she said when I finished. "You own an entire estate on Lake Geneva and you've been living in a 1-bedroom apartment." "The estate comes with complications," I said. Apparently, she shook her head in amazement. "But good for you. Standing up to family is hard." "Is it standing up for myself if I mostly just let them think what they wanted?" I asked. "You told them the truth eventually," Jennifer pointed out. "That takes courage." A week after the dinner, my Aunt Paula called. She was my mother's sister, and we'd always had a cordial but distant relationship. "Rosa, your mother told me what happened," Paula said carefully. "I wanted to hear your side." I explained everything, including the years of being overlooked and the dinner where they planned out their entire life at the lake house without once considering my feelings. Paula was quiet when I finished. Then she said something that surprised me. "I'm not shocked Eleanor left you the house." "You're not?" "Your grandmother talked to me about it before she died," Paula said. She wanted to make sure she was doing the right thing. I told her that she should leave her property to whomever she chose and that her reasoning was sound. "She talked to you about it." "She did. She felt terrible about putting you in this position, but she also felt strongly that you deserve something that was entirely yours, something your parents couldn't take credit for or control." Paula paused. "She knew your mother. My sister had always favored Charlotte. It broke her heart." Tears stung my eyes. I didn't know that. "Eleanor loved both her granddaughters," Paula said, "but she recognized that you needed her advocacy more. Charlotte had your parents. You had your grandmother." "Mom and Dad want to contest the will," I said. "They won't," Paula said confidently. "I already told your mother it would be a waste of money and would only damage their relationship with you further. Besides, Eleanor's will is legally solid. I was one of the witnesses." "You were?" "I was, and I'll testify to her competence and clear intentions if necessary." Paula's voice softened. "Rosa, what are you going to do with the property?" "I don't know yet," I admitted. "I love that house, but I don't know if I can enjoy it knowing how much resentment it's caused." "The house didn't cause the resentment," Paula said wisely. "It just revealed what was already there." I thought about that for days afterward. Paula was right. The inequality in my family had always existed. The house had simply made it impossible to ignore anymore. 3 days after Paula's call, I received a letter in the mail. The return address showed my mother's handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of her monogrammed stationery. "Rosa," it read, "your father and I have discussed this situation extensively. We believe you have been influenced against your family and are making decisions that will cause you regret. We are prepared to offer you a reasonable settlement for the property enough to purchase your own home elsewhere, so that the Lake Geneva estate can remain in the family as intended. We will give you 1 week to consider this generous offer. Please think carefully about the consequences of your selfishness. Mother." I read the letter 3 times, each time feeling a different emotion. First, anger at the accusation of being influenced. Then, bitter amusement at calling their offer generous when they wanted me to sell my inheritance for less than market value. Finally, a deep sadness that even now they couldn't understand what they'd done wrong. I didn't respond to the letter. Not that day, not that week. I let the deadline pass like smoke. They had given me ultimatums my entire life, and I was done dancing to their demands. I called Mr. Fletcher again. "They want to buy the property from me," I told him, reading the letter aloud. He was quiet for a moment. "Do you want to sell?" "No," I said immediately. "That house is the only place I've ever felt truly valued." "Then don't," he said simply. "And you don't need to justify that decision to anyone, not even to them." "They gave me a 1-week deadline," I said. "It passed 2 days ago." "Good," he said firmly. "Let them sit with their own anxiety for once. You don't owe them anything, Rosa. not your inheritance, not your memories, not your connection to your grandmother. They'll never forgive me, I said. Maybe not, he acknowledged. But the question is whether you can forgive yourself if you give this up just to keep peace with people who have never kept peace with you. Over the next few weeks, my family cycled through various stages of grief and anger. Once they realized I wasn't responding to their settlement offer, the tone of their messages shifted. My mother sent me long emails about family loyalty and how disappointed she was. My father left voicemails about legal obligations and moral duties. Charlotte texted me paragraphs about how I'd ruined her children's expectations and damaged our relationship beyond repair. I read and listened to all of it, but I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I drove out to Lake Geneva one weekend and walked through the property that was mine. The house looked exactly as I remembered. The wraparound porch where Grandma and I used to sit, the garden where we planted roses, the dock where we'd watch sunsets, the pool house that Charlotte had been so excited to claim. I sat on the porch swing and let myself cry. Not from sadness exactly, but from the release of years of feeling invisible and undervalued. My grandmother had seen me. She'd loved me enough to give me something precious, but she'd also given me a choice about what to do with that love. I pulled out my phone and called Mr. Fletcher. "Rosa," he said warmly, "how are you holding up?" "I've been better," I admitted. I told my family about the will. "I heard your mother's attorney contacted me. I set them straight about the legal realities. I need your advice," I said, "about what to do next." "What do you want to do?" he asked. I thought about it carefully. I want to honor Grandma's gift, but I also don't want to be the villain in my family forever. "Those two things aren't mutually exclusive," Mr. Fletcher said. "You can keep what's yours and still extend grace." "How?" He was quiet for a moment. "What if you invited them to have a real conversation? Not about who deserves what, but about what your grandmother wanted and why she made the choices she did." "They won't listen," I said. "Maybe not at first," he agreed. "But you might be surprised. People often react defensively when they feel attacked. But if you approach this from a place of wanting to heal rather than wanting to win, you might get different results." I watched a family of ducks glide across the water, the ducklings following their mother in a perfect line. Nature made family dynamics look so simple. "What if I invite them here and it goes badly?" I asked. "What if they trash the place out of spite or refuse to leave?" "Then you call the police and have them removed," Mr. Fletcher said practically. "You're the legal owner, Rosa. You have rights. But I don't think it will come to that. Your family is hurt and angry, but they're not criminals." "They feel betrayed," I said quietly. "Yes," he agreed. "But you were betrayed first for years by being treated as lesser. Sometimes people need to feel the sting of their own behavior reflected back at them before they can understand the damage they've caused." After we hung up, I sat on that porch swing for another hour thinking. Then I drafted an email to my parents and Charlotte. "I know the past few weeks have been difficult," I wrote. "I understand that Grandma's decision was a shock, and I'm sorry for not telling you sooner. I thought I was protecting myself, but I realize I was also preventing us from having honest conversations about our family dynamics. I'd like to invite you all to the lake house in 2 weeks. No lawyers, no arguments, just family trying to figure out how to move forward. I'm not asking you to agree with Grandma's decision or to pretend everything is fine. I'm just asking you to listen to why she made the choice she did and to hear what I'm proposing for the future. If you're willing to have that conversation, let me know. Love, Rosa." I sent it before I could second-guess myself. My mother responded first, surprisingly. "We'll be there." Charlotte took longer, but eventually sent a terse reply. 2 weeks later, my family gathered at the Lake Geneva house. The atmosphere was tense as we sat around the dining table where Grandma used to serve her famous pot roast. I prepared what I wanted to say, but seeing them all there, angry, hurt, confused, made my carefully planned speech evaporate. Instead, I just started talking. "Grandma left me this house because I spent every summer here with her while you all were busy with your lives," I said. "She left it to me because I helped her maintain it, because I loved it the way she did, because I showed up. Not because she loved Charlotte less or because she wanted to punish anyone." "She could have divided it between you," my mother said. "She could have," I agreed. "But she didn't want me to have to negotiate and compromise and fight for space in a place that was supposed to be a sanctuary. She wanted me to have something that was completely mine." "That seems selfish," Charlotte said. Maybe I acknowledged, or maybe it was the only way she knew to make sure I was truly taken care of. You all have always had each other. I've always been on the outside. That's not true, my mother protested. Mom, I said gently, it is true. And pretending it isn't doesn't help anyone. My father shifted uncomfortably. So what now? You're just going to keep the entire estate for yourself. That depends, I said, on what Charlotte asked, on whether we can have honest conversations about our family. I said about the ways we've hurt each other and the ways we can do better. The conversation that followed was hard. There were tears, raised voices, and painful truths. My mother admitted she'd always found it easier to relate to Charlotte because they were more similar. My father confessed he'd been disappointed when I chose social work instead of a more lucrative career. Charlotte acknowledged she'd taken her favored position for granted and rarely considered how it affected me. I shared my own hurts and resentments, the years of feeling invisible and less important. It wasn't a magical healing moment. We didn't hug and cry and instantly repair decades of damage. But it was honest, which was more than we'd ever been before. When we'd exhausted ourselves with hard truths, I shared my proposal. The house is mine, I said firmly. That's not changing. But I'm willing to establish some guidelines for family use. Charlotte, you and your family can use the pool house for 2 weeks every summer and holidays if you'd like. Mom and Dad, you're welcome to stay in the main house when you visit with advance notice. But this is my home now, and I need you to respect that. What about renovations? Charlotte asked quietly. Any changes to the property need my approval, I said. I'm open to discussions about updates that make sense. And if we can't accept these terms, my father asked. Then you don't visit, I said simply. I'm not going to beg you to be part of my life, but I'm offering a path forward if you want it. There was a long silence. Finally, my mother spoke. I think we need to apologize to you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Not just for the assumptions about the house, but for years of making you feel less than. I'm sorry too, Charlotte added quietly. I never realized how much my privilege hurt you. My father nodded, unable to speak, but his eyes were wet. It wasn't everything. It wasn't complete healing or perfect understanding, but it was a start. As they prepared to leave that afternoon, Sophie approached me shyly. Aunt Rosa. She said, I drew you a new picture. It's not for a bedroom anymore. It's just for you. The drawing showed the lake house with hearts around it and the words, Aunt Rosa's house in careful letters. Thank you, Sophie, I said, hugging her. This means a lot to me. Over the following months, we slowly rebuilt our relationships. There were setbacks and difficult moments. My mother sometimes slipped back into old patterns of favoritism. Charlotte occasionally made comments that revealed she still felt entitled to more than she was given. My father struggled with accepting that his daughter didn't need his approval. But we were trying, which was more than we'd done before. I made the lake house my primary residence, finally giving up my small apartment. I set up a home office where I could do my social work remotely several days a week. I restored Grandma's gardens and repainted the dock. And yes, I let Charlotte's family use the pool house for their 2 weeks each summer. Sophie and Dylan loved it. Watching them play by the pool reminded me of my own childhood summers there. The difference was that now, when they visited, they were guests in my home. They asked before using things. They respected my space. They thanked me for the privilege of being there. It was amazing how much that shift in dynamic changed everything. One evening, as the sun set over the lake, Charlotte and I sat on the porch with glasses of wine. The kids were catching fireflies on the lawn, and our parents had gone to bed early. I'm starting to understand why Grandma did this, Charlotte said quietly. You needed something that was completely yours. She paused. Something no one could take away or diminish. I've always had that security. You never did. Thank you for saying that, I said. I'm sorry it took me so long, Charlotte replied, and I'm sorry you had to fight so hard to be valued in this family. I'm sorry too, I said, for letting you all make plans and not stopping it sooner. That wasn't fair either. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the fireflies and listening to the children's laughter. This is a beautiful place, Charlotte said eventually. Thank you for sharing it with us. Thank you for respecting that it's mine to share, I replied. It wasn't the ending any of us had expected. It wasn't the simple, happily ever after of a family drama. But it was real, and it was honest, and it was ours. The property deed still showed my name only, but now, instead of being a weapon or a source of bitterness, it was simply a fact, one that everyone had learned to accept. And on quiet mornings, when I sat on the porch with my coffee, I could almost feel my grandmother sitting beside me, proud that I'd finally stood up for myself and claimed the space I deserved. I saw you, I whispered to her memory. Thank you for seeing me first. The house stood solid around me, a gift of love and recognition, a sanctuary that was completely and irrevocably mine. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the other daughter. I just felt like me.